Hello, hello. Welcome to our Beers with VCs podcast. We are Sabrina and Simon, your hosts, and today we are very excited to be joined by Anthony Gonzalez. Anthony has had over a decade of experience as a founder, advisor, mentor, and executive coach. And throughout his journey, he's gained some incredible insights into how to embrace failure to push towards success. Anthony, welcome. We're very excited to talk to you today.
Welcome,
Thank you.
Anthony.
Awesome. So to start us off, let's go around the room, say what we're drinking today.
Excellent. I'm happy to promote my local brewery, Ingrid, from Moore Park, California. This is their delicious Hefeweizen, and I'm a big fan, so that's what I'll be drinking today.
Ooh.
Can you show the can a little closer, Anthony?
Of course.
It's really cool design, actually.
Yeah,
Very
family-owned
very
brewery.
Bavarian.
Like the mom works there, the son makes the beer. Like they label it all on site.
Oh, that's amazing.
Wow.
And they serve liters of beer, which is pretty hard to find these days. And so you can go to
Yeah.
Ingrid
Awesome.
and
that's
get yourself
awesome.
a liter of beer.
Kudos
Love
for
it.
promoting a local
We love
family-owned
local.
business. Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
I'll check him out.
Okay, I'll go next. Not quite as exciting, but one of my favorite beers, continuing in the Mexican beer tradition from the past couple of shows. This one's really good, Modelo Negra, one of my favorites.
Simón.
And
Órale.
classic.
I love it. Mine is the most festive. It's just a cider, so nothing too
Oh,
fancy,
nice.
but delicious.
If you say winter cider, it sounds better because we're in winter.
Oh, a winter cider.
Ooh.
It's got to add those extra marketing adjectives in there.
Speaking
Yeah, we gotta
of
promote.
which, I got to start on my mulled wine trend. It's that time of year.
Yes.
Next episode.
Yeah,
I'll do mulled wine for sure.
let's do it. Let's do it.
How sophisticated of you, Simon.
I know. Love it.
Another like German glue wine is very German as well, very Bavarian,
I love it.
Oktoberfestish. Okay.
Love Anthony, we're
Let's
really
get
excited to
started.
go into your background. I think, well, maybe we can set the scene. Tell us about how you've gotten to where you are today, and we can sort of dive through different milestones.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to probably give you a much longer pitch than most of your other guests because I like to talk a lot and I have a lot to say. So growing up, I was that crazy, out of control child, and my parents didn't know what to do with me. So they really encouraged me into sports. I played individual sports, organized sports, big sports, small sports, team sports. And I really was attracted to wrestling. I was pretty good at it in high school. I was a little arrogant, and I thought it was so good that I could just walk on to the Division I wrestling program. And so when I got to Arizona State, I was like, oh, I was good for the local Ventura County wrestling community where I grew up. And I walked into a Division I program, and I was like, whoa, these people know how to wrestle. They were been doing it for 15 years, even though they're 19 years old. And it was like a scene from Rudy. They're like, oh, yeah, you can be the wrestling dummy for 4 years. You'll probably never compete for the university. You're welcome to come get beat up with the team. I was like, oh, I'm way out of my league here. That was a real nice dose of humility early on when I was young. And so I actually transitioned into club rugby. But during that time, I was still a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I started that in high school. I had wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so throughout college, I was cross-training from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and rugby. I would literally go from rugby practice, the next day Jiu-Jitsu, rugby, tournaments on the weekends. And I did that for about 4 years. And I share all that extra context because it was the foundation of my professional career. I finished school. I was a vagabond in Asia, ran out of money, had to come home, get a big boy job, and ended up working at a very large distributor selling components. I was 1-800 number at a company called Avnet, a very large distributor. So I was just exposed to all these electronics, but I was pretty geeky. I built my own computer in high school. I used to do 56K dial up, to connect to the internet to play, video games. And I really was attracted to learning how things worked. And then I was in an MBA program, and I was tasked with coming up with a personal problem of my own. It was like entrepreneurship 506, creativity, innovation. And so it was meant to just think. It was really kind of a philosophical class. And I was like, I'm getting hit in the head a bunch. I go to rugby, I get hit in the head. Go to jiu-jitsu, get hit in the head. I sell these sensors that track stuff, and I know what it's worked on. I know these applications. And it's why don't I take the things I sell at work and put it into the only piece of translational equipment I have in both, or I use in both my sports. And at that time, that was a mouth guard. And so in my school, while working full time, I came up with this pretty good idea. And I told my buddy about it. And like 6 days later, there's a startup competition on campus, and we put together like the crappiest slide deck. I had some engineering boards of an accelerometer that like just moved on a chart. So all it did was move the accelerometer and just display the acceleration rates. And I had an LED, and it said, "Hey guys," I had a mouth guard, and I literally was my own like breakout board. I said, "All right, so here's the idea. If I take these accelerometers and I put it in this mouth guard, and then you get hit really hard, the mouth guard will light up." And I was just like being an illusionist, like doing sleight of hand. We ended up winning like $5,000 with an idea I came up a week ago. And I was like, "Oh, this is great." And that $5,000 was actually retained with a law firm, which is super helpful because they got all of our partnership agreements, NDAs, corporate structure, like all the stuff I had no idea how to do. Like that was the gift. So it was no cash, but it was like allowed us to be investable is really what it did. And so finished up my MBA program, finished up working for a year. We kind of like sat on it, thinking about it. What are we trying to do here? And, we really went down this path. This is great. We ended up raising $100,000 of friends and family money, thankfully, because we were investable, evolved the product from more of just separate things to one single thing. We got into an accelerator program here in Los Angeles called the Make in LA Accelerator Program. So that kind of steamrolled the progression. Then we got invited to a television show on CNBC, and we raised money on a television show, season 1, episode 1, raised money from a billionaire. His name's Chris Birch. He co-founded Tory Burch, the fashion line. That was cool, super exciting. And then we realized how damn expensive it is to make a consumer electronic. We were chronically underfunded. Like we went on the show asking for 300, they gave us 1. Like we tried to raise a $500,000 round, we had like 175 bridge round from friends and family. And so like coming out of the accelerator program, having this halfway idea that was kind of good, but no proof, no objectable data, obviously no EBITDA. Like we weren't even close to revenue sales. And like it died. And like that was a super humbling experience. Like that was my first big failure, but it wasn't really a failure in my perspective of it. It was like, it was a stop. And so I had to go get another job. So like I wound down, oh, I'm the founder, I'm the CTO. I got punched in the mouth because I was undercapitalized and I knew it. And I thought hope was a strategy. And I thought I could hope my way out of the reality that I was faced to. But I took it on the chin and I got a job quite tangential to what I was trying to do. So I was thankfully accepted as a role to do business development with a life science trade association. And so they're a nonprofit. They sat over the organization. I got to meet with VCs. I got to meet with tech transfer offices, PhDs, like people who are starting life science companies. And then I was like, oh, I'm not raising money for a consumer electronic. I'm a medical device company. I was just calling it wrong the whole time. And so I literally took exactly what we had technology, like the same exact tech stack, and they just made a whole new slide deck, a life science slide deck. Hey, this could be a medical device if we had enough money. That's why it's taken us so long. That's why it's going to cost so many $1 million before we can make our first dollar in revenue. And I was able to raise $1 million seed round in 2018 while working full time at my nonprofit. Ironically, led by that first job I had at college, corporate strategic venture. And was because my co-founder was extremely influential in that relationship. And he still worked there at the organization. And I had previously worked there. So we kind of had ethos. And we got into having conversations with the CEO, who happened to be a former Division I wrestler from Lehigh University. And so I always encourage people to like come from a human angle, because if you form strong human personal connections, people will organically want to help you. And that was like a really good data point on that. Raised the seed round, wasn't enough to quit my job. I had a partner at that time. It was like, cool, honey, you raised $1 million. Don't you dare quit, because that's not going to get you anywhere. You should have learned from the last time you were undercapitalized. But from that prototype, we had the malware built. We started to build out a mobile application. And then we ended up closing a $10 million Series A, which is like, for most people, like you think of all this pre-seed startups, like a kid who had an idea in school to like closing a $10 million Series A and all the check boxes and like the emotional and dopamine high we were living off of. It's like, maybe did something 90%. However, because we've never done this before, there were some very interesting nuances in how complicated a $10 million Series A can be. So ours was technically tranched over a few rounds of 3 and then 3 and then 3 and a little buffer. And so we got the first 3 million. We all quit our jobs. I convinced my co-founder, I convinced our CTO to like, hey, this is the right choice. Like we have this money locked down. That was September of 2019. for a sports hardware company, right? That's a really important data point. We all know what happened 6 months later. The world shut down, COVID shut down, sports shut down. There was no way. And honestly, we thought it was the saving grace we were never, ever afforded, because now we could develop in silence where no one's bugging us to hit deadlines. No one's expecting units. It was like, holy crap, this is going to be great because we're going to come out of this way farther than we went into it when sports opened up. Unfortunately, one of the complications with raising money from a corporate strategic is they're not professional investors. They're executives who have a job at a corporation. And when things like acts of God cause the stock price to go down, sometimes your executive suite gets swept. And so our C-suite, who led the investment, was transitioned out, and a new executive team was brought in with clear direction from the board that they're no longer allowed to make corporate strategic investments, and they need to renege on their core portfolio with all future investments. So despite having an ironclad, guaranteed $10 million Series A, we soon became acquainted with a nuanced legal jargon called force majeure, which is something buried in the back of every contract that if there is a ridiculous act of God, it allows them to make this contract unenforceable. So to our largest investor from a billion-dollar public traded company, or do we take this on the chin? And we walk away again. And so we came to an agreement benevolently, right? Like they never had any ill will. It wasn't a personal, hey, we're screwing over Anthony. Is like they're at their job being told what they need to be doing. Same for us. And so they're still on our board. We still have a decent relationship with them. It was traumatic though, right? So here I am coming into Q4 of 2020 with an election year, with no sports, with a winding down budget because I was expecting to get a $3 million tranche. And so like I was spending accordingly, and a team of 8, right? Like full-time jobs, parents, like people. And we basically all got in a room. It's like, hey, we're all taking 20% pay cuts and we all are laid off on like June 1st, like 6 months from now. Is everyone okay with proceeding forward? Like it was just utter transparency. What else are you going to do? Like it's the worst news you can imagine. It's like, great, let's get in the room. Let's crunch out the numbers. What's their 0 day, which is every founder should know what their day 0 is. And that's the day you run out of money. We knew it. We watched it. I think those 6 months, we had 362 engagements with investors, a ton of half maybes, a ton of, I love this. Let me know when you start selling. This is great. I can't wait till I see this in team's hands. Let me know when you have a customer base. Like sports are shut down. So it was like a duplicative request. It's like, yeah, well, if there were sports, we have sales. We literally have purchases and people can't play. Like it was a cash flow issue, but it was more of like a cash flow in a weird sense. And so we shut up shop. I mean, we didn't make it. We closed down the organization. We wound down all our engineering files. And that was very traumatic for myself, for my co-founders. I helped all of our employees get jobs as best I could. And I kind of transitioned out to another startup. And so I ended up joining another Series B startup in the sports tech space that just closed 40 million. So from like a career path, my resume is like, yeah, from Series A to Series B. And I got to go through that growth phase. We went from like 25 to 80 in like a year. Just had too much money, not enough people. They were growing like crazy, but they were growing like crazy for a transitory reason, which was COVID restrictions. And then that crazy growth led to crazy drop off when those restrictions were released. And then I was shortly after coming through a fairly traumatic transition and a layoff right back in the job market. And, you know, there goes my savings. I have to tell my wife, like, what are we going to do? Health insurance, benefits. And that's a lot to carry. We'll kind of get to how I manage that. But then I had a phenomenal opportunity. I got recruited by a very large bank because of my founder experience, because of the drudgery that I went through. And they brought me on to be a business banker serving founders. It's like, great, I'm on the other side of the table. I felt like I cashed out my chips. It's like I still get to work with startups all day. I get to help founders. I get to be a coach, which I love doing because I coach wrestling and jujitsu. And I was doing a real good job going through credit training, learning a whole new industry, accepting my new identity. I just transitioned yet again from like a CEO founder back to a business banker. And unfortunately, I worked at the second largest bank crash in American history when there was a run on the bank at First Republic, causing us to liquidate our bond portfolio to such a degree where the FDIC put us in receivership. And get on a call. There's Jamie Dimon looking like his evil luxury or evil man in London and just says, I don't want to buy this bank. I didn't mean to. I tried to give you $30 billion, so I don't even know what I'm going to do with you. Give me a month to figure out what's going on. So we're all just like, okay. So it's just a lame dunk month of like nothing to do. Please don't do anything. They're asking us not to do things. And then we get on a Zoom call, the whole entire bank, and there's just 3 rooms. And it's like the layoff room, the temp jobs, and the permanent jobs.
Oh my God.
And I'm sure we all know where this story is going, but I was jokingly that I was just in the wrong room. Like I'm supposed to be with those guys. Like I shouldn't be in the layoff Zoom room, but being an inexperienced banker, like not having a big portfolio, I get it. Again, these are business decisions. Stuff happens. Decisions need to be made. And so yet again, I found myself laid off for the 4th time in 3 years. I would like to say to no fault of my own, but I'm a little biased. And every single time I had to deal with the trauma of that transition. And so I hope that big buildup and all that extra context will provide us some assets to dive into deeper. And I know I was a little verbose and talking a lot about some extra details, but all that content is really important because everyone I'm sure could relate to one microcosm of those experiences. And I wanted to kind of just lay it all out there because that's the type of person I am.
Yeah, it's incredible just to see. There's been super high highs. There've been obviously low lows, but it's been incredible to see you have an incredible ability to pivot and figure out how to sort of build yourself back up and move forward. And I think that's exactly the meat of what we want to like sort of pick apart of like the mentality and the psychology of how through all of these incredible transitions, founders are able to push forward. And it's an under highlighted part of the industry in that failure is a part of this journey for every single person on this journey. And no one talks about really how to go from the low lows back to starting to climb the hill again. So maybe we can start the conversation with starting from a low, like what are the first things that you can do as a person to figure out what the next steps are?
Process your grief. And there are phases of grief. And I think it's important to just simply be able to articulate your own feelings. I'm mad. This upsets me. I feel useless. Why would anyone love me? Just being able to say those to yourself by yourself can be healing.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, I said it once, and then you say it again. Then you say it to someone else. And you start to realize those words were a part of your brain that were speaking to you that you have more control over. The brain evolved like an onion. So you have your amygdala, your core, which has, all these animals have it, reptiles have it. It's your fear and it's your raw emotions. And as what I believe our species evolved and we layered more and more logic on top, all the way to we have this very large prefrontal cortex, which allows us to think abstractly, think logically, plan for the future, look back at the past, and most importantly, reflect on the self.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we call it our monkey brain and like our philosophical brain. And it's about understanding your monkey brain's going to win in the short term. But if you can rationalize that, hey, if there's steps I can take, I can overpower that monkey brain, those emotions, those feelings. And the first step is to articulate them. This is what I feel.
Yeah. It feels like if there's a mountain to climb, the first few steps are absolutely the hardest when you're knocked down to the floor. And so just verbalizing, this is how I feel at least you can break through that ice wall that you're trying to walk through and can start the journey on the way back up. It's really
journaling
powerful.
is an equally sufficient way to articulate that as well. Like if you don't feel comfortable saying it, writing it, you can get the same therapeutic benefits, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And do the reps matter? Like, do you have to get comfortable with doing this on a regular basis in order for your muscle to be strengthened? Or is it something that it's kind of on an as-needed basis?
I think it's important to continually do things because most things are a skill. Like all of our faculties, they take years of practice to develop that skill, whether it's creativity, whether it's innovation, whether it's trauma, transitioning through trauma. People aren't used to being uncomfortable, and people will try to avoid being uncomfortable. They'll procrastinate it. They'll defer from it. And then they're not very good about dealing with uncomfortable situations. They're the ones who complain the most. It's like, well, you need to like cowboy up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that same thing with like communicating. If you can't talk to yourself, how are you gonna ever talk to someone else? It's like, I talk out loud to myself. And I don't care. I'm a pretty shameless person, but like I think out loud. I do my jujitsu moves out loud, but I'm talking to me because that's who I'm trying to talk to. My logical brain is trying to talk to my emotional brain. And so like even articulating you alone will get you comfortable to say that to someone else. And then you build your community. And then your community knows how to support you because they know what you're going through and they feel a part of your problem. And so then it's an us, not a me. And I think that's really important. That's what you need to get to, is you need to bring other people in your support network, your sphere of influence, your bubble of trust, and you need to let them carry some of that burden. And that's your job for them.
What I love about what you just mentioned, though, is that you can't bring in a community until you come to terms with yourself and who you are and recognize all aspects of yourself as a person. It's something that I think over the course of everyone's career, they realize at a certain point, like, oh, I am fully in charge of the way that I can show up in my environment. There are so many other factors out of my control, but at the end of the day, it is just myself that I'm coming back to. And I need to be able to show up for myself, by myself, in the best way in order to attract the community and the people around me in the way that I would need them to be. So self-work is coming up as a recurring theme here of really being able to confront the hardships well. It's such a hard thing to explain to someone who is stuck behind the ice wall, but how can we help others take those first steps when they're still looking at the giant barrier that's ahead of them?
So let me preface that I may get a little philosophical because I have some unique and alternative views, but I personally believe you need to know yourself and you need to spend time inside of your own body. And so when we think about the brain isn't living in real time, it's living in near real time. And so what the brain does is it absorbs stimulation from the outside world, your ears, your eyes, but there's a certain amount of latency that it takes for those stimuli to get transferred into consciousness and then experienced. That takes up a lot of bandwidth. And when you're constantly stimulated with external stimulation, you don't have time to reflect what your internal stimulations are. Your emotions, your neurotransmitters and how this change the hormones throughout, your life. And one thing that's extremely helpful about breath work, and I don't want to use the word meditation because I think that has some connotations. I'm talking about controlling the rate of oxygen into your bloodstream in a tactical and skillful manner to produce a positive and therapeutic outcome. Okay, there's no Eastern
Cheers to
philosophy.
that.
Thank you.
You just described meditation, but I appreciate it.
I did not say the M word. I'd encourage people is to practice breath work by closing their eyes, being in a quiet or calm place to turn off those external stimulations so you can just focus on why your chest is so tight and why your heart is beating so fast when you're just sitting down. And ask yourself, why am I feeling what I'm feeling? What is this? Who am I? That's a skill. And you have to spend minutes in those moments. And when you spend enough minutes, they become hours, and those hours become days, and those days become weeks of where you spent time with you. And people don't, because you can go on TikTok when you're in the bathroom. You could be having music on and a podcast within their shower. When you're driving, there's 7 different things going on. Technology has stimulated us to such a sufficient degree, we forget who we are with ourselves, our own interpersonal relationship with your body. And so I believe I am my own God and I'm controlling my body. So when I want my body to do hard things, I push it really, really hard. And my body gives me feedback. That's too hard. I'm sore. I ache. I feel. And so like my body and my consciousness have a relationship. And so they talk to one another. One speaks in chemicals and one speaks in, human consciousness. And I think people don't, again, because I have a unique view on the world. I just made it up. It's like, it's one way to like view having a personal relationship. But if you don't have a relationship with yourself, it's very difficult for you to build better relationships with other human beings.
I completely agree with that. It's been honestly a personal self journey of understanding the relationship between regulating myself mentally, physically, emotionally with how I'm able to show up in the world. It's been, I think meditation in general feels very foreign, I think, to a lot of Western society and very like a waste of time. And it's such a shame that we have so many people that are showing up in today's like Western corporate environment that don't understand the importance of being able to regulate yourself and be able to show up as a person that you want to be in different social situations because you haven't done the work to understand who you are and how you can actually heal yourself internally before you exude all of the things you're dealing with onto the rest of the world, even unintentionally. It's something that it's a practice that has to be prioritized on a regular basis, as you're mentioning. And I what keeps coming back to me too is all of your training through sports has given you the reps of being able to mentally handle and develop these types of learnings. I would love to talk a little bit more about how sports and how jiu-jitsu has really influenced your day-to-day mentality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of my favorite subjects. So I'm glad you brought it up. I could talk about this all day long. So the way you learn in jiu-jitsu is by losing. You just keep on losing until one day you stop losing as much. And then you're losing a little bit less. And then they're not beating you as much. You're taking a draw. And then like years later, you're like, well, I'm winning. Whoa, this is cool. And so like there is no other way to learn jiu-jitsu but to put yourself through repetitive, uncomfortable drudgery that needs to be physically and mentally fought through. And you have to decide if you want to do that again.
Yeah.
For weeks and months and years. I started in 2005. I'm on 18 years of jiu-jitsu. I go many times a week. It is my religion, and it's what I proselytize because it allows me to have this aura of self-confidence because I know I can do hard things because I've proven that to myself because I continue to do hard things. And I embrace the uncomfortability as a process to metamorphosize into the thing I would like to be, which is a better version of myself. And I control that because I am my own God. And if I want to do and be better, I'm going to dictate what my body's going to do every single day. And I do things I don't like to do to achieve the outcomes I want to have.
Mm-hmm. There's a huge confidence with knowing that you understand the limits of how you can push yourself to achieve things. And I think doing that in a physical realm in some capacity translates absolutely into professional, intellectual ways. And it really comes down to, it sounds like, getting the reps in, like understanding that every time you lose, like, you know that you can push through it because you've done it hundreds of times before. And it's so common, I think, for especially people as children nowadays are hesitant to let their kids fail, or adults are hesitant to let their kids fail. Children are not used to failing for that reason. I think especially in my generation, as we were growing up, success was what everyone was driving towards. You would never say to a kid, that was awful, you sucked, like, don't do that again. It was always encouraging, like, oh, you can always do better next time. And the lens is put on success as opposed to failure. And there's a toughness that I think the previous generation before me had to endure in order to figure out how to cope. And I wonder if there is a mentality shift between the way that generations are raised that is causing this discomfort with failure in general. Do you think it's an epidemic? Like, can it be turned around?
I think the human species, Homo sapiens, are at their end. I think in not very many generations, we will no longer consider those people Homo sapiens because of how they live and interact with technology to such a sufficient degree has passed an assertion point where like an anthropologist will be like, yeah, those are no longer Homo sapiens. Those
That
are
is
like
a terrifying
Homo 2.0,
thought.
Homo
Oh
Deus.
my God.
We're not that far away. When you think about people putting stuff in their body, why do I have these headphones in my ear where they just be implanted in my ear? Right? Like, why do I need to put them on and off? Can't they just charge wirelessly? Like, why do I need to have GPT on a thing? Can't it just come through my headphones and then hook up to my Neuralink brain? Within 100 years, that's totally reasonable. It's like my grandkids aren't going to live the same reality I'm going to be. Because I'm a nihilist and I think we're all floating on a rock and it doesn't really matter anyways, I don't really care. Like, I am sympathetic and empathetic, but like what other people are doing don't really bother me. And I'm not really concerned about how other people view what I'm doing.
How do we encourage then? Will the direction that society is going encourage failure still? Like, it seems like we're losing the ability as a human
to answer that question,
to deal with failure.
We are learning how grit. People don't know how to be uncomfortable. Let's just break it down to that. That's one of the first lessons I teach people. You need to accept that it sucks to be you right now. So what are you going to do about it? That man is trying to choke you unconscious. What do you do? Let him choke you unconscious? No, you better fight out of that. You better do the only thing you can, which step one, like, it's this, it's that. It's like people want to quit when things are hard. Sometimes you have to accept you're just in a hard, tough spot, and the only person that's going to get you out of there is you. So what are you going to do about it? Not the government or my mom or other people. People try to place blame on others for their own failures.
It's a really powerful lesson. And so I guess extending this, it started with sports. It started with wrestling, being the, I guess, prop inside of the wrestling team that basically everyone would wrestle with you to sort of get their reps into, and continually being beat down, to say, strengthened you to a point where you knew you could handle this kind of I guess, abuse in some words.
Doing hard things allows you to know that you can accomplish difficult things when you're placed into a novel, difficult situation, because you have precedent and history to tell yourself, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I know I can.
Yeah.
Sure. And Anthony, on that note, do you think it's so you've been through a lot of, obviously, well, failures on both sides, on the jiu-jitsu, the learning experience.
That's how you learn. There's no offensive there. I get some.
And then on the business side, do you think there's value in the diversity of the failures, or do you think like it's kind of like a step change where you maybe it's both? Maybe it's like, okay, I've been through so much jiu-jitsu and I realize that like there's a switch that changes in your brain. It's like I can now like overcome really, really tough things. But yeah, what's curious on your perspective?
Yeah, so like think of it as like having stuff in your arsenal. In every novel, difficult situation, you have a new tool in your arsenal. And so when you're exposed to a similar enough problem, you're like, well, this isn't the perfect tool, but it's good enough. It's better than not having it. So I'm glad I have this one particular tool that I earned through this other difficult situation. And I think it's also like little things. Like, so I do little things in jiu-jitsu repetitively. So like we do 10 squats, 10 push-ups, 10 jumping jacks every single day. So I do that when I'm not training or I'm not in the gym. So, let me get my 10 squats in. I've also taken that rule of like habitual things that I don't really want to do, just forcing myself to do it, like professional development. So I wish people happy birthday on LinkedIn. I've wished over 10,000 people happy birthday in 2023 manually this year. Every single day, I go on LinkedIn like a chore. I go to notifications, it says, see who's celebrating. You go click, 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 and I go, happy birthday, send. And maybe it takes me all of 30 seconds. It's a simple little touch point. I'm not selling anything. I'm not doing anything. Genuinely just wishing you happy birthday. Sometimes people want to catch up. Maybe it's someone I had my MBA program a decade ago, and they share a picture with your kid. It makes me feel better about me. That's why I do it. So like that was just a translation. Like I took a martial art habit of just doing it every single day, and I found a professional application of that same mentality, and I was able to channel that into something that I also do in a professional capacity. And like I have hundreds of examples of that.
Mhm.
People
I
yelling
guess
at me.
the
I'm never intimidated with someone yelling at me. It's like, well, if this goes down, like I'm gonna win. So like I can handle chaos and
right.
people's raw emotions really, really well. 'Cause I'm super confident about myself. But even in the Zoom, when there's a hot topic conversation, like people are getting at it, like I'm super calm. It's like, oh, you're upset. You're mad about what they said. I'm like, yeah, I am. And like I could just like be a little mediator because like
Mhm.
it doesn't flare me up.
Yeah.
And
I
apologize for
guess
speaking over you, Simon.
no worries. Like one of the benefits of jiu-jitsu and sports in general is that failure has, a significant enough repercussion, but it's not like, spending years and failing at a business. So you
The
are going
small
to get
cost with the
some,
large dividend.
right.
And so like the cost of failure is small. It's like whatever, we just do it again. And the dividend of that failure like pays perpetually.
Hmm.
And it adds up
Right.
and those dividends accumulate and like, wow, like I can do stuff.
I think this speaks to the importance of also diversifying your life experience in general. Even if you're building a
Mhm.
company from the ground up, it's important to have outside ways, not just like for pure alleviating stress or anything like that, but also like you're getting in a diversification of reps for you to potentially fail in other ways so that you can continue to
Yes.
push through. Speak to a little bit about like the diversification of like because you've gone through super technical businesses, super new businesses, but always have maintained this passion in the athletic space. And can you speak to like how you balance all of that and have they fed into each other?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to actually just expand on to kind of the last trinity of these things, and that is having a tactile creative outlet that does not involve technology.
Mhm.
Whether that is woodworking, whether that is gardening, whether that is watercolors, whether that's playing with
Sculpting.
clay,
I just
sculpting,
posted
whatever it
my
may be.
clay sculpting on
Do
LinkedIn.
something with your hands that allows you to channel creativity and anxiety into a thing that you can skill up over time, that you enjoy, that you can channel.
Mhm.
And it's like a form of, okay, let's use the more secular word mindfulness than meditation, since that was a
Yes.
little jarring to you, Anthony. Sorry. But
No,
the
it's
other
okay.
M word, you kind of like, yeah, it's the whole like getting in
You go
the
into flow
zone,
state, right? Like
state,
you
right?
don't care about
Exactly.
anything else. You're focused on what you're focused on. You're
And
present in that moment.
it's inherently meditative. I'm sorry to use it as a
Inherently
verb.
meditative. Exactly. And so I do bonsai, which is the process of making a tree look older and from the wild. And like it destroys me when I kill my bonsai. And sometimes like I get lazy, I didn't go out there, I didn't water them, I didn't check on something. And so like I've had some really long failures of a project, like an 8-year tree that died this past heat wave, and like it really bummed me out. It's a tree, I understand that. But to me, and like within Shintoism, a Japanese religion, inanimate objects have their own soul. Like you think like Beauty and the Beast. Like there's a whole religion about like, no, every little thing is alive and it can die, it can be gone. And it's like, that sucks. And it was like my own little moment. I'm telling you about freaking tree died, and it pissed me off all week. It's like those little things, right? They just go into professional setting. You just learn how to deal with stuff. And so
Mhm.
like those channel outlets, breaking a pottery. Like I used to do pottery. Sometimes when you put it in the kiln, it comes out cracked. And I spent a lot of time on that, and now it's cracked. Now I have to do it again. Woodworking, you didn't glue up correctly. You didn't have your angles, or you finished your glue up and you're off by 1/8 of an inch because the girth of your saw blade switched and you didn't realize that, and you can't finish up your wood precisely. And so those creative outlets are just like a micro example of how you deal with failure. What do? Do you start breaking things? Do you start lighting it on fire because you're upset because you didn't get your way? And back to what you're talking about, Sabrina, about too much success is like, yeah, when people are always used to getting their way, they don't handle things not their way well.
And you need to practice things not going your way in order to figure out how to handle it well. It's interesting. The experience of different people gives them access to different types of mentors. And sometimes you don't have a good role model in your life for really how to deal with failure in a healthy way. And I think it's interesting to recognize that everyone has different life experiences, but you can always seek out opportunities to grow in that respect as well. And it's hard for people to take that first step into recognizing that there's a better way to react to certain situations, to actually making the changes required to do it. From my own experience, it starts with just seeing that modeled well in different situations. But in order to see it modeled well, you have to put yourself in new situations. And so I think it's a huge positive sign when we meet founders that have not only done some internal self-work, but also are extremely self-aware. I think self-awareness is probably the single most important criteria that a founder can have, because it allows them to figure out how they can improve themselves and be open to the possibility that there are other ways that they can grow themselves and put effort towards different things. There are so many little nucleuses, I think, that I want to dive into with the mentality that you've been building. But maybe we can start with the founder, founder persona. Like, what do you think are the most critical aspects of having a founder that actually is able to persevere to success?
So if I was talking from an investor point of view and someone founder is pitching me the problem they're solving, I want to know why they're solving that problem. Because if they're solving that problem for a financial benefit, to me, those are the people who quit the soonest. Oh, I want to make money. It's like, okay, money doesn't buy happiness. Money will buffer stressors. You're from a pretty well-off family. Like, your stresses are pretty buffered already. Like, what do you want to do? Because when they don't get their way and they're not used to it, they quit. And it's like, oh yeah, but you just quit on my money you spent, and I have LPs to report to. It's like, you're going to be the type of guy, person, woman, non-binary folks as well, individual who's going to quit when something is difficult. And to me, you need to have an intrinsic and very visceral connection to the problem you're solving. You're going to want to solve that problem whether you had the money or not. Like, you're going to just figure it out, because that problem you're solving is so important to you. Come hell or high water, something's going to happen. Good, bad, or neutral, you're going to make it happen. And when people have that degree of intimacy with the problem they're solving, they're the best type of founder. So maybe they had a parent pass away, and so they started an end-of-life SaaS company that helps you deal with that. Or they've gone through cancer, and so then they help come up with Tinder for finding a cancer doctor. Or like, whatever, take your big problem, your big grief, your big suffering, and if you can channel that into a pathos, passion for why you're solving a problem, and a consequence could be you make some money, which would be nice, but that's not what drives you. To me, those are investable founders.
We share that mentality at Omni. One of our theses is investing in professionals that have suffered through their day jobs for a number of years, so much so that they're leaving their job, their nice, comfy job, to start a business to solve that exact problem. And that persona has grit inherently. They have an amount of self-awareness inherently to know that, like, I have the power to change my reality and actually start this business. And so I think I completely agree. It's very self-selecting for the type of founder that comes with all of these qualities that are important for creating a successful business.
I want to just touch on one point, which is the founder failure. I had several conversations on investing in founders, especially early stage VCs. It's, we know the metrics, we know the stats, and I think as a founder, there should be less shame in failure, as long as you are like absolutely trying your best, showing your best, and communicating that, right? Like, I think any good VC that sees you in the trenches fighting for the survival of your company will and should support you going forward, no matter what. And we see our relationships with founders as, more and lasting longer than necessarily their first startup, whether it's a IPO success exit or whether it's them going on to build something bigger and better.
Yep. You're investing in the person. And hopefully this company works out. But if not, it'll probably be the second one because they've learned from
Exactly.
their failures.
And you'll have
Carry
built
on.
that trust and that relationship, and they'll come and talk to you first with their next great idea.
Yep. Well said, Simon. Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
That's why we're here, right?
Yeah, Anthony, I appreciate your intro was a little long, but like there was a lot of like details that, commend you for diving in and explaining those. And sometimes I agree, like it's really great to hear those details, and as people connect, it might actually inspire. It inspired me. So yeah, cheers to your intro and
Thank
like,
you. I wasn't sure. We went with the monologue.
Really tough topic. Yeah. Happy to have into the dialogue now part.
Exactly. So, one last touch point I wanted to talk on is just the philosophy of suffering and how suffering allows you to be grateful. And if you do not suffer and you do not put in forth effort, when you achieve an outcome, your level of gratuity is correlated to how much you suffered to achieve that outcome. So little suffering equals little gratuity. And gratuity is a skill. Like our other skills, they need to be developed, and you need to practice gratuity by understanding, hey, I need to pause and be grateful for where I am. Like I'm employed. Like I have cold beer in my fridge. I have a warm bed to sleep in. It's like, yeah, I'm dealing with some shit, but there's some other people dealing with much harder stuff. And like, let me just take a moment and pause and appreciate what I've gone through to get where I am today. Let me self-reflect, which is like the theme of today. I'll help you transition through your traumas.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that can actually be interpreted at varying levels and degrees. It actually reminded me of something. I was having a conversation with a founder yesterday who was like super excited about bringing on a new executive and wanted to give him an offer like pretty quickly after not necessarily a ton of interviewing, because he came highly recommended, et cetera, et cetera. There were like very strong signs. And I said, look, put him through the process anyway. I didn't say make him suffer. I said make him appreciate the outcome, that make him feel like he earned it, right?
Earned it. Yeah.
And it's like sometimes it's annoying to do these things that are just like more psychological than logical, but it's proven, I'm sure, in many ways. I've definitely seen it work really well, and people appreciate it much more if they feel like 100%. They've earned it.
That's flipping the mentality then of like not just dealing with your own suffering, but also selectively causing suffering for other people so that they can appreciate the outcome more.
That's
selectively share suffering.
And jiu-jitsu, that's my responsibility for the younger belts. Like I am obliged to make them suffer. And it is my responsibility to pass on the suffering that was given to me from my professors and my masters. Hama Bahal, who gave me my black belt, he's just the fiercest dude. He never gives you anything. But if you ever even get close to scoring a point, like that could be your jiu-jitsu career you're talking about. Like this one time I almost did one thing just because you earned it. And there's something to the pride and prestige of earning it. And I wish I had a lapel badge, a Purple Heart equivalent that says I'm a failed founder and I'm proud of it. Look at here. Talk about it all day long. I went through this. This is my scar and my cross to bear. And I'm okay with sharing how you might be able to avoid what I went through or get through what you might also be going through.
And why it gives you the strength to persevere. You're like, I failed once. I know what it's like, and I know that I can get out of it. So it's also I think we need to flip the narrative around showcasing failure, because it shows that you are a resilient person, that if you failed multiple times in the past, that you're able to get back up and continue dusting yourself and moving forward.
I need like a LinkedIn badge that gives me the visual credibility. But it's super true, because I also try to be a beacon that I'm open with my failures. Like, hey, you want to talk about failure? Like, come talk to me. I failed a bunch. Let's fail together. Like, I try to proselytize and normalize that it's okay to fail. Just do it forward. Don't be failing backwards. Inefficient. Like, fail up. And I think if there's a testament to failing up, I've shown at least one data point where it's possible.
I actually saw a post recently of if you're achieving 100% of your company's metrics every month, that means that you're not pushing your company to grow fast enough. It means that you should be maybe setting
Sure.
the marker a little bit further so that you can keep growing faster. Yeah, it is a really interesting catch-22. Like the venture world is all success based. It's like the Stanford kid who like is 22 and builds the billion-dollar company out of like 1 year of work. Like, and not to say that's not incredibly challenging, but there are so many other important ways to find resiliency in your career as well. And if everything is handed to you, you're not going to be able to persevere when the going does get hard. And I think as a society, it's kind of up to us to encourage failure as a part of this journey. And we need to rally around encouraging each other when failures happen and recognize that it's a part of building yourself up to be better the next time.
Exactly.
I love it. Totally on the same page. There are so many more juicy nuggets of your history that I would love to dive into, but I think we're approaching the end of the hour. I want to first ask, if people want to get in touch with you, Anthony, where can they go? Is LinkedIn the best method? Or
LinkedIn's the best. You can always email me. It's anthony@gonzalez.mba. So that's my email. Reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn. If there's any way I can help you, I'm more than willing to do that altruistically and unconditionally.
It's amazing. On our final question of our podcast today, we want to throw it back to the community and ask you, Anthony, who has been the most impactful person in your career and why?
That would have to be my co-founder, who we bared the cross of our startup burden for over 8 years, Bob Merriman. We worked at Avnet together. He's also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was, the forefather to me. He made me suffer plenty. And that professional or jiu-jitsu relationship translated into professional relationship. So we have phenomenal fraternity. We are very similar in that sense, which is a good thing, but also a bad thing because like you both do the same thing. It's hard to divide and conquer. But I love him like a brother. I love him like a friend. We say I love you to each other. I think that's also okay for males to identify that they have a loving relationship with another male. And I just have to be so grateful that he was the iron that sharpened my iron and made me a better version of myself by just being who he is.
That is incredible. Cheers to him for always being there on your guys' journey. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights, Anthony.
Of course. Thank you for having me today.
You're a very inspiring person. Like, you've developed yourself in a ridiculously holistic way, like balancing your masculinity and strength with your vulnerability and understanding of human psychology, like better than I'd say, 99% of the people I know. So yeah, it's been really, really cool chatting. Awesome. Really, really cool. Thanks.
Thank you for your kind words.
I'm glad we randomly, yeah, of course. We one of many great people I've met initially through, actually we've still only met virtually. So it's really cool.
It's because I'm shameless, because shame is a social construct and I just don't participate in shame. So if there's someone I want to reach out to, I just reach out to them. And that's what happens.
Yeah. I think you're also, and to quickly touch on this topic, because I'm a big proponent of LinkedIn. There's a lot of spam on LinkedIn, which sucks, and hopefully they keep fighting that. The other inbox, they're calling it, because a lot of it is monetized. But I think there's still opportunity for personal connections. Honestly, some of the most meaningful people I have in my life, in my career, I met through LinkedIn over the course of many years, have developed like really, really strong connections. So thanks for putting yourself out there and being genuine and starting to build, these deep connections. So cheers to that.
Well met, you, Paz.
And on that note, saúde, bom dia. I won't say the like final closing in Portuguese. I need to practice that.
I actually have a closing for us. I think it's relevant. So Água mole, pedra duro, tanto bate até que fura. And excuse
Nice.
my American accent, but
No, it's not bad.
soft water will beat on hard rock until it breaks.
Muito bem. Muito bem. E gostei muito de falar contigo hoje. And we'll keep
Well,
fighting my Portuguese accent with your Portuguese Brazilian. But on that note, this has been Beers with VCs with Simon, Sabrina, and Anthony Gonzalez. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching, and have a great weekend. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.